be taken, students and pupils who've been affected are going to be taken to other schools so that learning can continue. So let's bring in a member of parliament whose constituency has been affected, and that is Nyando. And that's why we are speaking to Jared Okello, who is the member of parliament in Nyando. Mheshimiwa, thank you for talking to us here on KTN News Center once again. The last time we spoke, you were talking about merging schools. Has that happened? Because as of yesterday, some pupils and students could not report back to school because of flooding.
I thank you very much, Brenda. Thank you for the opportunity. We did see a reopening of schools yesterday, though partially. Most of the students, as a matter of fact, were not able to report because of the levels of preparedness, both from the parents' standpoint and from the school's standpoint. As you are aware, and the nation is also aware, 10 of my schools are still marooned in water that is coming out from the Lake Victoria bulging out, and all these schools are still waterlogged and no activity can happen in these schools. Yesterday, even though in a very small scale, some schools were merged, and if you allow me, I would mention a few. I have two schools called Nyamrundu and Osei that are now merged with Odienya Primary School, and now we have three schools in one. We also have Kandaria merging with Ugwe, so we have two schools in one. We have Kandaria Secondary merging with Duru Secondary, so two schools in one. At the moment, that is highly likely because you still have only Form 4s reporting in school. So on the flip side, if you were to have all the students report in school, then you can imagine the explosion that will happen amidst the scarcity of resources and scarcity of sanitation facilities within these schools. The schools that merged yesterday, primary schools, we only have standard 8 and class 4. So it is a bit manageable, apart from the long distances that these students have to contend with as they travel to schools that were hitherto not theirs. And therefore, you have to travel a little longer to get to schools. And you look at a standard 4 kid, they're so tiny, they're so small, and they have to travel long distances to access education, which is a matter of right, as is enshrined in our Constitution. Well, it is a situation that we live in at the moment, but we hope that the government will be able to come up with long-lasting solutions. The day before yesterday, the government, through the Ministry of Education, did provide certain makeshift tents that will be erected in these schools that have merged, so that even if the students will all be reporting to schools, and I want to believe that will come in the foreseeable future, then they will have those makeshift tents to act as classrooms in the interim. Building takes a while, but it is sad that that particular building has not commenced yet. How I wish that the capitation monies, together with other grants that the government did promise us during the COVID period, will be expanded to these schools in good time so that we can start building this classroom. It takes about a month or two to come up with a building. So this inordinate delays by the government is also a negative parameter on the side of these schools, Brenda.
But then, as much as you're talking about the government giving an alternative of makeshift tents as a classroom, the concern of some parents would be, where are these makeshift tents? Because if the classes are flooded, yet classes are built using, concrete, the tents are likely also to be washed away by the floods.
Yeah, that is likely. If it would rain, I would say that most of these schools will still be closed. And we have seen this happening before. I didn't mention schools like Ombaka Primary, Ombaka Secondary, Ogenya Primary schools that are also heavily affected by the flooding. But again, as you correctly put it, if there will be a situation where another round of flooding would occur, then, a tent, if a concrete building is heavily affected, then what about a tent? And even if it will not be a flooding of high levels, then you are considering issues of wind that perennially also come. So if you have a tent that is erected on a compound and there is a heavy wind that is in the offing, then it also portends danger to the lives of these children. So that is why I'm hoping that this is just a very short stopgap measure as we await to have a long-term solution. Some of the schools that have been heavily affected, and we have discussed this in depth with the Minister of Education, will have to move to a higher ground, not just for now, but forever. So that therefore means building additional classrooms, additional ablution blocks and other offices to help, create just a new school. Some of them have already identified land in higher grounds, and that is good news. Some are still in the process of getting land, but there's no government land, so you have to pay. So for us, within the Nyando belt, even though the government has done what it ought to do of reopening schools, we still have to go a long way to at least attain what I may call, certainty in learning at this point in time. So we would just appeal through the Ministry of Education, and particularly the CS Education Professor Magoha, to extend a little further the assistance that they give to schools. I have seen the dilapidated situation in Baringo, and Nyando is no different. So the government can concentrate on these two regions so that we stabilize the students as they go to school. Because learning, as I said, is a matter of right. It's not a privilege to any.
All right, and as we wind up, some parents, and if you watched that story that was done by my colleague, Kevin Ogutu, wondering why this looks like a last-minute sort of preparations, yet even the other time, like 2 weeks ago when we talked, it was about the CS for Education making a tour there, just to see how bad the situation is. But away from that, Mheshimiwa, let's talk about the social distancing that will have to be done in these schools that have been merged so as to accommodate a learning space for the students.
That is an absolute impossibility. Apart from the fact that, children, particularly African children, are social in nature, it becomes very difficult to separate them, even on a normal situation. But here is a situation presented by COVID-19, which therefore forces every kid, every teacher, every school worker to maintain some little social distance. But then you have schools that are already exploded in terms of number of kids. The schools that have merged, for instance, have between 400 to 600 students already, and you're looking at an 8-classroom school. So you're looking at an average of about 50 to 60 students in one classroom, 50 to 60. And then you have merged 2 more schools brought together to then talk about over 1,500 students in one single school. Then you have to then consider issues of social distancing between students. That is an absolute impossibility.
Right.
And if, God forbid, if there would be an upsurge of corona within those areas, then you can only imagine what is likely to happen. And that is why we are putting a very special appeal to the government to move with speed, erect permanent buildings. If there are these schools that will, migrate forever, let that be a priority. Let us not look at peripheral issues at the moment, but concentrate on the welfare of these students for posterity, not stopgap measures, Brenda.
All right, and finally, in a minute, as we wind up, there is a directive, let me say a directive that was given yesterday by CS Magoha to parents saying that they now have to take care of the children's masks. And owing to the fact that parents are financially burdened, looking at the interior areas of the constituency that you represent, what is your view on that statement?
Corona, as a matter of fact, has denied many families livelihoods. Many have lost jobs. Many would-be markets are closed. Places where, for instance, where I come from, rice being the dominant cash crop, we cannot access markets to sell our produce. The government, I think 2-3 months ago, did promise to supply sanitation facilities, the PPEs, the masks, to students. But yesterday, as is typical of this government, they turned around and said, now it behoves parents to pay for those things. In a situation where you have absolute, scarcity of resources within people. So this is going to be another very, very big challenge. Even those parents themselves do not have masks. I've attended some events in my village, funerals, some weddings, even visiting market centers. People do not don those masks just because they cannot afford. And even if they can afford, it is not a priority. I mean, you have to juggle between food and masks. I will go for food myself. So these are problems that we are experiencing at the moment. And therefore, passing that burden on to the parents to buy masks to students. And a kid would don a mask for 1 minute or 2 minutes, and it is totally untidy and hence not suitable for such a condition. So then you are looking at about 3 to 4 masks in a day, and these masks are never cheap, about 100 shillings to...
All right, we have been talking to Nyayo, Member of Parliament, Jared Okello, talking to us about the situation in his constituency where schools have had to be merged because of flooding. And earlier on, we also talked to the County Commissioner of Baringo, Henry Wafula, also painting for us a picture of what is happening in Baringo. So let me just... he's back. So let me just give him just like a minute just to give us your final feedback, Honorable Okello.
I thank you, and I regret the technical hitch. What I was saying is that the parents are not in a position at the moment to buy masks to their children. And when there's a calamity in a nation and people do not access their places of work or places of market centers where they can sell their produce, the only thing that becomes their number one consideration is food. Parents are now eating not from hand to mouth, but from finger to tooth because of the job situation in the country. And you expect these same parents to check out 200 shillings on a daily basis to buy masks to students who are going to school. How I wish that the masks that are with KEMSA to the tune of 2.3 billion shillings, if the auditor report is anything to go by, would be given out to students for free, so that at least they can help maintain the social distancing and paying attention to the donning of masks and other PPEs that are a requirement during this COVID period. But, taxing our parents more to give monies to buy masks, that is not going to happen, Brenda. I'm afraid.
All right. Thank you so much, Jared Okello, Member of Parliament for Nyayo, concerning, just giving us your sentiments on what is happening in your constituency.